Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&As. I'm recording these just about a day early on late Thursday afternoon, and I'll probably have to record a day early or maybe even a day late next week. So my apologies if I miss anybody's questions. Just please re-ask them in the following week if I do miss it, or of course just message me directly if it's something really important. But anyway, let's jump in and see what we got. First up on Patreon, Fupa Troopa says, "Hey, I'm moving to New York City at the end of the month and want to know if you had any recommendations for cool retro game related spots to check out, stores, arcades, etc. I realize in light of COVID, some places might be closed or operating in different capacities, but I want to at least get some stuff on my radar." Yeah, definitely. It's, the New York City retro gaming tour is kind of been the same for a few years now, at least in my opinion. And I'll try to mention the stuff that probably won't be opened, but I always recommend people start around Rockefeller Center and the Nintendo store because there's so much to see around there. It's walking distance to and from all of the major transportation and other cool sites and stuff like that. I don't know if the Nintendo store is open. You would definitely want to check. Then I recommend walking down to J&L. Which is a pretty interesting store. They concentrate a lot on import stuff. Some of the pricing is incredibly fair, and some of the pricing very much reflects the fact that they're in a very touristy section of New York City. So, but it's a laid-back place. There's no high-pressure sales or any of that annoying stuff. There's been plenty of times where I've gone in, looked for 5-10 minutes, bought something cheap and left, and no one ever busted my chops. I try not to ever go to these places and just hang out all day, by the way. That always, some people in some stores, that's okay. It's part of their culture. But for me, I always just felt like I was taking up space when I did that. Unless there's arcade tournaments, unless you're buying a bunch of stuff. I mean, I'm just talking about like walking in and just kind of staring for 2 hours and leaving. Always, I'm not really sure how any of these stores feel about that, especially nowadays with stuff. But anyway, moving along. Now from here, outside of the touristy sections of Manhattan, it's kind of like the planets. Every time you go somewhere else, it's twice the distance from the last. But there is a lot of other cool stuff out there. There's a bunch of barcades that are very cool. I'm not sure if any of them are still open, but they're exactly what you would expect at a barcade in that they're not going to be the best quality. A lot of the sticks are barely going to work, but you do get a good variety, and the beers are reasonably priced for New York City. So definitely hit up any of those in between. There's one on 23rd and one kind of near Video Games New York, which is my favorite. I even got to be kind of buddies with one of the bartenders over there. That one's a cool one because you could go before or afterwards to Video Games New York, which is another cool store. They have like a museum area in the middle. Now remember, this is New York, so everything's going to be so much smaller than everywhere else. And when I joke about their museum area, it's like 3 pieces of, glassed off casing for you to look at cool stuff in. But it is an awesome store to go to. There's a lot of cool things in there. And like J&L, some of the prices on some of their stuff are a bit high, but there's also some really cheap stuff there. You just have to go in, knowing what to look for. And, a lot of times too, there's stuff that might not be so, it might not be that it's dirt cheap. It's just that it's so plentiful there where you're like, holy crap, I can buy brand new Dreamcast VMUs for a reasonable price. Like, that's pretty neat. How often can you walk into a store and get that nowadays? And then of course there's my home away from home, Brooklyn Video Games. Absolutely love that store. I would normally recommend going there when there's a tournament because it's just a lot of fun. And, it's a small store. You can't really go and just hang there while there's a tournament. Although I sometimes do because I'm getting footage and trying to help blow it up, which most of the time I really feel like I'm in the way, but everybody there is really nice. So I just try to say hi, hang out for a bit, check out the tournament, get some footage, and then, move along. But that is definitely one of my favorite stores of all time, just because it's, everything's priced reasonably. And, that's the only store I know of where you could just check out a full RGB setup. So like if you're going in there and you see, I don't know if they still have it, but they had an sRGB modded front loader. And if you wanted to try it out to make sure it worked in RGB, you could try it out on a BVM, which is kind of above and beyond for game stores and stuff like that. I heard there's at least one other game store in Manhattan, and I believe there's also Gotham Video Games in Brooklyn, which I knew the former owner, but I haven't actually been to the store. So I would just kind of take those store suggestions that I just said and Google what's around it. And, because you're not guaranteed that everything's going to be open and at full capacity and, you're moving here, I would kind of like make each one a little bit of an adventure. Like, all right, I'm going to go to Brooklyn Video Games today, but before I'm going to look in that area and I want to go to this pizza place or this restaurant, and just kind of make a day trip out of each one. So you get a couple hours. The Nintendo Store one would probably be easiest just because it's Rockefeller Center and there's a ton of stuff around there. But I would kind of just use each one of these stores as an excuse to go and check out the neighborhood. So looks like you have a second question. Since I can't haul a 27-inch CRT on a plane with me, I'm going to have to part ways with my trusty Sharp consumer set. Do you have any recommendations on the best way to find a new CRT in the city? I'm looking for something in the same size neighborhood as my 27-inch set with component video. Are there any specific places I could consider swinging by, or am I best off doing the Craigslist dance? Definitely best off on Craigslist, but just be patient because there's so many assholes out there that Google retro gaming, see that it's popular, and put what should be a $10 TV for $250, and then it sits on Craigslist for months. Nobody pays it, but they think they're sitting on a small pile of cash, and they're hoping that eventually somebody dumb enough to just pay it is going to come along. Don't be that person. Just be patient. I see them pop up all the time. And one good thing, if you have a car or if you have the ability to travel quickly to and from those areas, a friend in the neighborhood, an unlimited Uber pass or whatever, one of the things that I would recommend is just waiting for anything to come around that's good enough. So, it doesn't have a component, but it's got composite already and it's the right size. Pick that up for now. And then whenever you see the one that you want, then you could swap over to it. So it's, if you're moving to New York City, you're probably going to be limited on space. So you would then have to find a place to get rid of the first monitor when you're done with it. But, I would just kind of keep your eyes open, be patient, and just wait for something cheap to come through, because every time I've seen something tempting that I was like, man, that's not worth $200, and I don't want to make these idiots think that all CRTs are worth hundreds of dollars. I was tempted because I needed it for a video, or it would fit perfectly in an arcade tournament that we were making, and I ended up just not doing it, waiting a couple weeks, and ended up finding everything I needed for a reasonable price. So yeah, don't feed the scalpers. But good luck in your move to New York City, and hopefully when the world opens back up, we can have a few more tournaments and a few more meetups and stuff and have some fun. Next up, the GOAT just wanted to confirm the conversation from last week that all of these Wii and Wii U sensor bars don't actually contain any sensors or information that they send back to the console. It's basically just infrared LEDs and power. So I don't know why I hesitated. I was pretty sure of that, but it's always good to double check. Especially when when it's something like that involves input lag. Even if you think you know the answer, some Googling. It's never a bad idea. So thanks for chiming in and reminding me. The GOAT also wanted to follow up on my question of why would you want to use 720p from a Nintendo 64 on a BVM? And the answer is no reason. It's just a new option added by the updated firmware, so they thought they'd try it out. You just described like half of the rat holes I go down, which very often end in nothing, by the way. I mean, sometimes I'll think of something like this and go, hey, I wonder if this is a good idea. And I'll spend, a weekend on a project. And at the end, I'll either come out with it and it'll work or it won't work. But the research sparked something that's equally as cool. And it's all a really fun project and a good learning experience. And so many other times I'll try stuff like that just to see if it'll work, spend an entire day or two, and then go, yeah, none of that worked. And I guess it was, why did I spend my time doing that? So I'm not saying that's what you're doing with the 720p. I'm just saying hey, no reason. I just wanted to try it. Reminded me of probably minimum twice a month. I go down a long day-long rat hole about something that may or may not end in what I had hoped it would be. So, let me know if you get it working and if you're able to figure it out, and if you find a reason why it would, you would want to use that over a different mode. But I think just for gaming, standard original output would probably be more than good enough. The Remora said the power supply for their PS2 Slim has been misplaced, and they want to replace it with something that won't kill it. They've been looking around online, and unfortunately, Triad does not make a compatible power supply, and the $10 ones on Amazon just seem too cheap. I know it's not your favorite thing, but do you have a recommendation? I don't have a recommendation, but I would suggest looking around to other people that have solved this issue before, because I believe the PS2 Slim power supply is also compatible with a bunch of other stuff, each of which had a quality original power supply with it. I'm not really remembering what any of those are at the moment, but I know I'd heard that multiple times. And you could also find them used on eBay for a decent price as well. It's been a while since I've needed to order one, but it wasn't ridiculously priced finding a used one. So that would definitely be my first choice, but just finding a used official. But I would definitely do some research and see what else it's compatible with. I don't know why, but I feel like somebody said their laptop, or at the time, had the same power supply and it was the same exact voltage, which doesn't make sense because the voltage doesn't match laptops. So maybe I'm confusing two stories together. In fact, I probably am, but I do know that there are other stuff that use that PSU, so that could be an option as well. Obed Samuel has installed a Voltar RGB bypass board into a Genesis Model 1, along with a mini DIN connector hooked up using the breakout board. The console works fine with a properly attenuated RGB cable, however, the customer has a CRT with only component video inputs. They have no experience with component and only really use RGB via SCART here in the UK, so they can't advise him. He has an HD Retrovision Genesis 1 cable that works with the old 8-pin DIN. Is it as simple as buying a Genesis 2 HD Retrovision cable and using it with the new 9-pin DIN? I'm not sure how these cables source sync, so I have no idea if they work with the newly installed 9-pin DIN. So mixed news here. First of all, there is no Genesis 1 HD Retrovision cable. It's only the Genesis 2 that goes through the pigtail adapter. So your customer already has the cable they need. Just take off that pigtail adapter and use the HD Retrovision cable. Now those cables all use composite video as sync for a million very good reasons. But that could still work with this. You would just have had to have run composite video or sync to the composite video pad at the correct voltage. So a lot of people that I know who install these things for customers with HD Retrovision cables wire sync to both the C-Sync port and composite video, but when you connect, you have to connect it through a resistor because the HD Retrovision cables are expecting the same voltage that composite video outputs. So if you send it, TTL level C-Sync like is supposed to be outputted from the C-Sync pin of Genesis, you're definitely going to be sending way too much voltage. And stuff like this is why STI has taken a very hard stance on they are not supported on modded consoles because it's just so easy to mod a console wrong and blow out the cable. If they're only going to be using HD Retrovisions, you could take the wire off of C-Sync, put it onto a resistor, and put that onto the composite video in pad and be done. The only downside of doing that is at that point you've kind of lost. If anybody plugs in a C-Sync cable, they're going to think that the console doesn't work. The other thing that you could do, I'm assuming you did the RGB pin lift to isolate the signals. If you hadn't, you could, even if you did, I guess you could try to wire composite video from the Sony CXA encoder to that. Once again, I think you would have to you would either have to find the resistor on the board, or you would have to, add a resistor and check the voltage on a scope or something like that. Because while you would not actually get composite video from that pin, unless you lifted the sync pin off of the main chip, then it should at least still be sending sync and probably some other garbage information through that. So you're going to have to figure that one out on your own. You're going to have to make sure it's the proper voltage without knowing exactly the style of how you modded it, what you did, and all that stuff. I can't really give any advice. Just make sure that sync is going to the composite video pin at composite video voltage, and that's all that needs to be done. Should be a pretty easy thing. Just choose whichever path based on what you've already done to mod it. Also, do I know of any decent 2.4 gigahertz wireless controllers for the PS2 or PS1? No, I don't. I heard of adapters that allow you to use a PS3 controller on those, but I haven't tested one myself, and I don't really remember the feedback on it. So really sorry, I'm not going to be any help on that one. Michael Caramonte wants to know if they have an Insurrection Industries GameCube HDMI adapter and want to convert that to component for a CRT rather than using the GameCube component cables. Is there a downside to that? No. You have to have another box that probably has another AC adapter with it, and then you would have to have another HDMI cable before going to component. But other than a tiny bit of extra cost and a little bit of extra clutter, no, there's no gaming experience downside to that. So as long as you get a converter that is just digital to analog, it will be zero lag introduced. I've never tested one that's just a digital to analog or analog to digital converter that added lag. However, there are some that look the same that also say scales to 1080p or, HDMI, 1080p to your composite TV or whatever it is. The ones that actually scale, yes, they're probably going to be 2 frames of variable lag because they're designed for TV signals. So it's not something that you would want for gaming, but just the basic ones, you should have no problem. You said you weren't able to find them on the RetroRGB page. If you mean the converters page, I don't really keep them there because they do change pretty often. I keep them in the Amazon store, although now that I say this out loud, I should be linking to the Amazon page from the converters page, but that's linked in every one of these videos. So just go to the Amazon store, and I think they'll all be there. I vaguely remember at one point them not showing up because it was out of stock or something like that. So I'll try to check before this video goes live, but the ones I linked to there were tested by me personally. They have never added any lag, and they do vary in quality sometimes. I've had people tell me that they're absolutely flawless, people with solid eyes for this, and I've had other people say, hey, I got one, I popped it open, it didn't look like the one that you had, maybe they switched the guts on a different manufacturing run, I'm getting like ringing around the edges of the picture or something, I'll return it and get another one. But to be honest, you're buying it from Amazon and they're super cheap, so it is well worth the risk, especially because it's a small percentage of people have contacted me saying they had issues with the ones that I linked to, and it's an overwhelming amount of people are all very thrilled that they spent less than $20 on something to do exactly what you wanted to do. I think at the end of the day, this is one of the reasons why Insurrection Industries, didn't really rush into making another run of their component cables, and it might not ever. I know they were kind of talking about it because you could get their Carby and one of these adapters for the same price as the Carby component. So many people would rather have the option for both. I'm sure many other people would just want the simplicity of one cable. But, to answer your question, there are no downsides other than some extra clutter. As long as you get the ones that are just digital to analog, there will not be any lag. You do have to understand, though, that unless your TV can accept 480p, you're going to have to make sure to only output in 480i. Otherwise, your TV is not going to be able to see it. And I'll double check the Amazon page, but they should be in stock and available to purchase. TJ has seen some of the stuff that Mike Chi, the RetroTink creator, has been posting and wants to know what he's up to. I make it a very solid policy to never ever comment on stuff that's still in progress, even if the creator already has. And just know that Mike is always working on stuff, always. So even if a product is released, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at 9:01, he's going to be working on something else that may or may never be released. It might just be a cool experiment that leads to something else. It might just be a personal project for fun, or it might be something that the moment it's announced, you're going to want to run out and buy. But you're going to have to wait and see specifically what that one is. It could be any one of those things. But Mike's a good dude, and Mike is also very patient with me. And very often I will be up with insomnia. I'll wake up at 2 a.m., not be able to get back to sleep, and I'll just randomly message him like, all right, I have an idea. What if we strap a Sega Genesis to a spaceship and make it a real something crazy? And he always responds. And some of those ideas actually have panned out and turned into some fun stuff. So I'm very, very much looking forward to see what Mike comes up with next. And whenever there is any official announcements on any of this stuff, you could guarantee that you'll hear it as soon as it's available. Goodnight had a question about their streaming setup, and it was a good question. I read every word of it, but just in the interest of people's time at home, I'm going to skip to the end. So they have a Genesis 2 connected at the moment through a cheap SCART cable, but eventually you're going to get HD Retrovisions, into an open source scan converter, which is now in 2x mode, 480p. That goes into a no-name powered HDMI splitter, and then it goes from there to an AverMedia Live Gamer portable capture card, and then through an HDMI to VGA converter, which then connects to a VGA CRT. And then they just use OBS for recording. So first of all, with the exception of the cheap Genesis cable, that is a perfectly awesome setup. Hopefully your VGA monitor is still bright enough so that if you wanted to use scan lines that you could, and it would look really close, almost identical to 240p, as I showed in that video a couple months ago. For streaming, I wouldn't use scan lines though, so I would just still enjoy the zero lag solution, because that absolutely is. Unless the HDMI to VGA converter does some kind of scaling, which most don't, all of that setup is zero lag. So there are a few issues with this that Goodnight's having with the setup. The first one says the colors on OBS look slightly worse than on their CRT and cause a slight blur, most noticeable on purple text. So that could absolutely be a result of unshielded cables. And it's my suggestion that I would just wait until your HD Retrovisions arrive before you start troubleshooting that one. That's just, it might not be it. It could be a million other things. It could be the capture card. But I've just seen so many issues as a result of unshielded cables that unless it's really, really bugging you, I would just wait until they arrive. You probably already ordered them and they're just waiting for them to come in stock or ship or something like that. So I would kind of come back to that. The other thing, unfortunately, I don't think there's anything you could do about either. There are two issues that seem to happen. First is a dropout on all devices whenever resolutions are changed, and that's always going to happen for a couple of different reasons. First, going between 480i and 240p, the OSSC is going to change its output mode, which means every single display connected to it will also have to change based on them detecting that the original video signal is being changed. So even though it's technically 480p output the whole time, the OSSC will have a small dropout. But because you also have introduced more devices, now you have a splitter, and then you have your capture card, and then you have that VGA or HDMI to VGA converter. Every time the signal drops out on one, it drops out on all three. So you could have up to 3 times the amount of delay that you would if you just had it direct connected. I've also seen plenty of issues with HDMI splitters hating the OSSC because of its non-standard timings, and it doesn't understand. And what those splitters do is to try to have that HDMI handshake with all 3 devices. So if something's off spec, sometimes it just kind of goes crazy. So I don't know of anything other than possibly getting a different splitter that people have had better luck with. It sounds like you're in the midst of doing that at the moment. And the only other thing you said is if the CRT is on, you have less issues than with the CRT off. With the CRT off and you just going directly into your capture setup, the video cuts in and out constantly. That could be the splitter as well, trying to figure out, is that VGA adapter on? Is it off? Am I dropping handshake? Am I not? So it's possible that that you could just keep that powered, keep that, the HDMI to VGA powered. If not, that's you might even want to try a different adapter, because I have a couple right here. Like this is the one I use with the Time Sleuth. And it's just a very basic HDMI to VGA converter. And this works perfect with the Time Sleuth. And it even works with the passive sync combiners that I use. So other than specific model BVMs, it even works going into either directly into RGB monitors or through composite converters and everything else. But in your case, this, I think, would not be a good idea, because this is going to be powered by HDMI, and you would probably want it powered by any kind of external adapter, so that even when your VGA monitor is off, it's still looking like it's on to the rest of the setup. Now, that's just my guess. It's based on all of the testing I've done with these, but I've never run into that specific setup. So there could be another streamer listening right now that's had this exact issue. If so, please comment anywhere, and hopefully, if there is a fix to it that's easy, hopefully somebody out there has it. But if not, my suggestions would be make sure that your HDMI to VGA converter is plugged into power at all times, so there isn't signal dropouts, and try a different splitter. And then, of course, just wait for the HD RetroVision cables. So I think I covered everything, but please let me know if I missed anything. Looks like all the questions were on Patreon this time, and I just want to remind everybody that wherever it is that you support, you could put these questions in. So at the moment, it's Patreon, Floatplane, and direct through the YouTube join service. Just please put the questions in the latest Q&A post, wherever it is that you support, just because the way these things work, it's almost impossible for me to sift back through previous weeks and see if anybody asked a new question. So, and it also kind of just flows smoother, just scrolling down through all the questions and kind of doing it in real time. So other than that, no new special announcements or anything this week, other than I might be a little late or a little early next week on the Q&As, but I'm still planning on doing them. I guess unless it's a slow week and there's only like a question or two, maybe I'll roll it over. I know it is a holiday weekend for a lot of people, but I guess we'll just roll with it and see what happens. Either way, thank you all for participating. I do really enjoy doing these. And of course, thank you all to everybody who supports, because you're keeping these videos, the weekly podcast, the higher production videos, the articles, and all of the crazy behind the scenes research I'm involved in going. So thank you very much. And I'll see you next week, I think, or the week after at the latest.